Hi, Zach.
Hello,
You're
Ann.
on.
Give me 5 minutes. I'm gonna log back in a second.
Sure. Hi, Greg.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Zach had to go off and do something for 5 minutes.
Yes, yes. I know he is traveling to the Dominican, I think. I don't know if he is there or here. Maybe. Well, where are you located then? I forgot.
Washington, D.C.
Oh, Washington. Okay.
And you say Zach is going to the Dominican?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Whoa, that's quite a trip.
Well, Dominican Republic. Well, he has his kids. He want to take his kids on vacation.
Ah,
Yeah, it's a little risky. I don't know. I wouldn't venture. But he's young. He can take the risk, I guess. I actually have a number of friends who do that. Go for the New Year's. I don't know. I'm staying put.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I'd love to travel. I just can't wait until this vaccine would become available for general public.
We're the same way here. We're just buttoned up and dying to get out. At least appears to be an end date, sort of.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think when do you think a vaccine will be available for general public? I mean, like maybe March, April, May.
Yeah, it looks like
that.
second or third quarter June. It depends on if there are any
June.
missteps.
Oh, my
It
God.
could be third quarter.
Oh,
I'm
June.
more concerned about international travel. That's really, parts of the third world don't get vaccinated until 2025. So
Yeah.
how international travel will resume is very, very unclear.
But if you are vaccinated, I mean, then you could travel, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
kind of
if you-
protected. So that, yeah, I know. I'm a little bit more kind of egotistical about this. I'm thinking about when can I travel?
Yeah, it's a defensive move.
Yeah, when can I travel? Because I I usually travel a lot, and it's been quite a conundrum for me.
Yeah, we travel quite a bit too. It's been quite awful, but
Yeah, it's definitely. So hopefully we'll get it without. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few months. I mean, it's getting out of control. This vaccine it's not going to help for a while.
John, where are you located?
oh, I'm just in Northern Virginia, just outside of Falls Church.
Oh, I'm right in Roslyn.
Yeah.
I didn't. We probably talked about this before, and I
we did.
forgot.
We're only about 12 miles away. So, Yeah, Virginia has done okay. It's in it's not great, but it's in the top 10 states in terms of having less.
Nobody's done great.
Yeah, I know. Well, Vermont has done great because nobody lives up there. So
Right.
that you are right. Well, yeah, we're having 3,000 deaths a year, cases a day in Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole Western world hasn't done well. I mean, it's doesn't seem to matter much what the government does. So
Well, half of the people don't believe in this, right?
yeah,
Don't
that
believe
is.
in vaccine, don't believe in the mask. The think it's exaggerated.
Yeah, but the UK is in terms of per capita deaths is doing worse than the US, and they don't have quite the same polarization. They have a fair amount, but
Are they doing worse? I'm not so sure.
no, in terms of, I was just reading The Economist. Germany
you
is
were
doing
reading
better than
recent-
any Western country. Italy is the worst in terms of per capita deaths.
Yeah, yeah.
What's Sweden's status?
Better than us, but not wonderful. I forget. It's like in the top half. I mean, they're famous for never having had a lockdown,
Exactly.
but they aren't doing well. But they aren't the bottom. Italy is the bottom. They got nobody. It's that, and nobody knows why. Asian countries seem to be doing great, but South
Yeah.
Korea in particular, it's not an island, but you know
Taiwan is great.
Excuse me.
Taiwan is even better.
Who?
Yes,
Iran?
Taiwan.
7 deaths.
Taiwan.
They practice masking and they're able to do
Yeah, they're very
control and
organized
tracking really well.
and obedient. They are obedient.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
this
is.
one-
They're definitely more obedient than Westerners. That is true,
Right.
particularly Americans. That's
Speaking of organized and obedient, I was surprised that Germany had mass demonstration against masks and so on. I never would have expected this from Germans.
well, the German numbers are going up. The death rates are still they're a quarter of what the U.S. is per capita deaths, but it's much worse than it was. I was reading they did so well in the spring that they just sort of let their guard down in the summer, and now it's here.
Hey guys, I want to welcome everybody. Sorry, I had to do something for a couple of minutes, but no, I'm not in DR yet, Greg.
Yeah.
I'm going soon. I'm going on Saturday.
Oh. Okay.
How long are you gonna stay there, Zach?
Until next week, Saturday, just a week.
What's the weather like down there now?
My son has been telling me it's like 80s, 90s, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
What's it doing with the virus? You hear about Mexico and Brazil a lot, but in the U.S. media, not much about anywhere else.
Hold on, let me just make sure that I do post it on Facebook Live, and then give me 1 second, and we'll start about 7:10. Is it okay with everybody?
Sounds good.
Fine.
Paul, where are you based at?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. All right. Are you a native New Yorker?
Born and bred.
Oh, wow.
I've made the long pilgrimage from Queens.
Oh. I thought that usually went the other way, Brooklyn to Queens.
What can I say?
Yeah, I went to
Where in
school in New
Queens?
York, and Brooklyn and Queens were on about the same social level 50 years ago, but now Brooklyn has become the playground of the rich and famous. It's
Well,
quite,
you know,
quite amazing.
Queens is more of a, like a commuter
Yeah.
place. Brooklyn has more, neighborhoods where people never leave their neighborhoods.
I
Yeah.
noticed
On
if
the
you,
other
if-
hand, there's been this huge explosion of, different ethnic groups in Queens. I think there are more different ethnic groups in Queens than any other place in the country.
yeah, there was a very sad story in the Times about that area right near Elmhurst, the hospital that became
Right.
famous as Ground Zero in the spring.
Yeah.
One of the, Queens is one of the worst hit areas in the country. I don't know.
I used to live there, nearby in Jackson Heights.
Yeah, they mentioned Jackson Heights.
Yeah, yeah, it was one of the worst. But my mother still lives there. I go there.
Zach lives in Queens.
I do.
Who else? Sergio?
Yeah, yeah, he is
Hmm.
definitely in Queens. I think he's somewhere like a Mass Press or something. Where, Paul? Which part of Queens are you? Did you grow up?
Rego Park, very
Rego-
close to Zach.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
was on,
Wow.
Zach's on the south side of Queens Boulevard. I was on the north side.
I love New Yorkers.
Oh,
Yeah, our last trip before the shutdown was to Manhattan. We spent Christmas week in Manhattan last year, and it was just glorious. Except my wife and I both got what we thought was the flu, which manifested itself, in early January. So we often wonder what it really was.
Get an antibody test.
Yeah, we could. Just there was a lot of illness in January, though. It's not. One thing I don't see is how they can tell the difference between normal flu and COVID. It seems obscure.
all right. Give another 3 minutes. How's everybody doing? I mean, look, this is going to be a discussion more than anything. I've prepared a long summary and slides. Sergio is going to log in. He's going to talk about Roman army organization. I understand this is the text, but this particular text was not easy to follow. So I mean, I read it twice, but I want to make it almost a I mean, people make it whatever it is, but I want to make it a historical, more like a walkthrough, a chronological walkthrough.
Right.
Sergio is going to log in, and he's going to talk about legions, and then he's going to talk about the siege of Jerusalem. So the two most important, I guess, pieces. And I don't know, he said he's going to log in about 8:30. So I'll show you a slide, and when he logs in, he'll explain it. Anyway, today's topic, I just, before everybody logs in, just wanted to we're going to talk about Josephus Flavius. The book was around, 600 pages. I read it, I listened to it, but it's a lot, So I just took some of the stuff that I thought was interesting, and it was more like chronological. And then whatever you guys want to discuss, stop me, we'll discuss, and then stuff like that. So the first slide, obviously, destruction of temple, and just wanted to show it. And so first I want to talk about the author, right? Josephus Flavius. So who was he? All right. So Josephus Flavius was, born, Joseph, the son of pronounced Matthias. He was raised to be a Pharisees. Who are the Pharisees? Basically, they were, they're the people that could offer them solace in their need, but just with limitation of written Torah, but based on a more dynamic tradition called oral law. Pharisees were the procurators of rabbinical tradition. So basically, he lived in a monastery for a brief time, and he was even considered to be Essenes. I don't know if you pronounce it correctly. And Essenes basically were the people. They shut themselves, and they would believe in the kingdom of God, who would come to brought about by divine intervention of God Himself and restore the Jewish people to their greatness as a nation. So he was both Pharisees and Essenes, and then as further we'll understand, he would obviously become Sadducees and stuff like that. So now, and I'll get more definitions as well. What's
Can
interesting
I
about,
add a little bit about the Essenes?
Yes,
You
go ahead,
know,
go ahead.
that, this, by the way, this the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found. These were for preserved.
I will talk about that.
Oh, you
Hold
will?
on.
Okay.
I
Oh, sorry.
please, yeah,
Okay.
don't
I
jump.
apologize. I didn't. I thought you finished with them.
No, no, no. You know, I will talk about it. So now, what's interesting about him is we know he was a Roman citizen, granted to him by the Vespasian, who was the father of Titus, and so he was very careful to not offend Romans when he wrote this. So everything that, especially, sometimes, you listen to some Jews and it's like everything he says in, in his writings doesn't contribute, is not from a religious text. He makes a lot of mistakes. Yes, he does, but it is what it is. I mean, this is just take it for a grain of salt. And also he can't offend Romans. So he can't really say he was the patriot, of Jewish culture and therefore defended Jewish culture and then not offend Romans because they were at war and the war was still going on as he was doing all this stuff. So it's difficult for him. So he starts with obviously introduction, preface. He basically initially starts talking about Herod's predecessors, right? Who the Herod's predecessors. We start with Antioch Epiphanes the fourth, who ruled about 175, 164 BCE. Basically tries to capture and plunders, Jerusalem, and triggers a revolt by the Matthews, who was the son of Asamoneus. Basically, his whole action would trigger the revolt. Epiphanes was a Greek, they call them, I guess, kings or whatever they call them. And then who was the Matthews? He basically, Matthews was followed by Judas the Maccabees. Everybody knows who Judas the Maccabees is, and the holiday of Hanukkah. But Judas was interesting. Before fighting the Epiphanes, aligns himself with Rome, and basically starts fighting the Epiphanes with more renewed faction. But let me just talk a little bit about this region, right? This is a present day Israel, and this is Old Testament Israel. And here we have Jerusalem, right here, and here Japata, and I got cut off a little bit and stuff like that. We know, what Japata's be interested. So let me just talk about it. So prior to this whole thing happening, the Jews, during this stuff, when Jews declared an independence through a revolt of Judas the Maccabees, they ruled for a little bit. After that, we have Hyrcanus, and then Hyrcanus was, succeeded by Aristobulus, and so further on. Then, basically, and we still have, and they used to call it the Greek rules. They used to call it Antipater. And what's interesting is during the civil war between Pompey and Caesar, and a little bit of contribution of Crassus, the Hyrcanus basically aligns himself with Pompey, but the father of Herod the Great, his name was Antipater, aligns himself and smartly enough with Caesar, and basically after Caesar defeats the so to speak Pompey, we basically have a situation where Caesar appoints appoints Herod, who was already a son of the Antipater, to be a king of Palestine, so to speak, and then Antony, who we know won after Caesar, yes, Octavian and and Cleopatra, reaffirms that appointment of Herod. Hi, Sergio. How are you? Sorry. Ari points so, and then this is a description. So what I wanted to say is basically, after all this is happening, Jews declared independence, but to Romans, we all know Egypt is a breadbasket, and without the Egypt being a breadbasket, Romans can't feed their extended population. So what they do is they basically they need Judea in order to pass through it. And at some point, there was declared that Jews asked Augustus if we could, become your protectorate and therefore, basically be part of the Roman Empire. And, basically, Augustus does not want any part of this because there's problems going on everywhere. There's Jews fighting Greeks. Greeks don't understand the Jewish culture. The Jews don't understand Greek culture. They don't understand why we do circumcision. And we know that Josephus also wrote a famous book against the Appian. Basically, it's not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism didn't really exist at the time, but I would say that that's the first book that, to basically help people that are not Jews to understand Jewish culture. By the time, they didn't really understand Jewish culture all that well. And so Caesar doesn't want to, Augustus doesn't want any part of this, but, reluctantly agrees to that. And then we also have to realize that, there's Parthians also, on the horizon. So everybody's trying to claim this part of the area because it leads to the Egypt, which is a breadbasket of Rome, and Parthians know it, everybody know it. So that's important to claim, to know, basically. So now we come to a point where we have Herod, who was a son of Antipater.
Can I add something, Zach? Maybe just go back one slide. Under the Hasmoneans, when the Hasmoneans declared a independent kingdom, at a certain point they actually started conquering the surrounding countries and forcing them to convert to Judaism. And so Herod, who was not a Jew by birth, was an inhabitant of one of these places that was conquered by the Hasmoneans. So his status as a Jew is very, murky. He's not ethnically a Jew and so that's kind of, it's a really complicated situation then. But that's why Herod was kind of an outsider insider.
Yeah, my John here, my impression is that Herod, that whole dynasty from Aristobulus on, they were Idumean, from a kingdom south of Judea, and
Right.
their ethnic affiliation has always been kind of murky to me. Were they Proto-Arabs or something? But they were never accepted by the temple aristocracy in Jerusalem.
But they were forcibly conquered, and they basically were given a choice, convert or die.
Yes, and they started getting circumcised, but the social distinction was never eliminated. In fact, as far as we know, the Jews in Judea were very hostile to Herod. Herod was a creature of Rome. And it sort of makes sense that the Romans would appoint a non-Jewish person to rule over a rather rambunctious Jewish population.
I don't know whether the Romans really knew that he wasn't Jewish.
They may not. Yeah, you're right. But one thing that's critical in this situation, we think of Jews as a tiny minority in the modern world, but the population counts go as high as 10% of the entire Roman Empire, including Judea and Alexandria and Rome. It was a very significant group.
And I think Herod, identified himself publicly as a Jew.
Yeah. Yes.
He made huge contributions to the temple in terms of construction and so forth.
But I think originally the Romans aligned with Antipater, who was chief counselor to the Hyrcanus II. And the other brother, was involved with Parthians. So they actually wanted to support this party. And when Hyrcanus died, and Antipater was the only one, so they aligned with him, and naturally his son Herod and his brother Pharsalus, I think, they eventually divided the rule between two of them. Pharsalus got the Jerusalem, and Herod got the Galilee in the beginning. Then later on, when Pharsalus died, Herod took the whole thing. He was appointed really.
Greg, let me stop you right there. You're going into my slides now. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I do. Okay,
Yeah,
I thought we. Okay, I thought we passed that.
We just talked about Herod's predecessors. Now we're talking about Herod. So you're talking about Herod now.
Okay, so
Okay.
so just a little more on Herod's predecessors then, just to people to get the big picture here. What we're really talking about is the aftermath of the collapse of the empire of Alexander the Great, which is 320 BC, and then warfare going on between his generals, and ultimately a confrontation with Rome, making it into first Greece in 200, and then again, and then into Asia Minor, and then sweeping all the way down as they just kind of blew the remnants of Alexander's empire into bits, and there was nothing left. And all these other little things that we see here with the Hasmoneans, they were all possible because of the fact that the power there was already being destroyed by Roman encroachment. Antiochus Epiphanes IV, his father, was the guy that really tried to reestablish a huge empire and got totally destroyed by the Romans. So that's all I wanted to say. That's the backdrop to these kind of local campaigns and squabbles.
Right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody. So just to move on, now we get to Herod. So it's interesting, at the time there was a Greek king, obviously Antigonus, that tried to basically, at the time, had a little bit of scuffle with Herod, but not just him, but also Cleopatra the Seventh was trying to also grab the same area in Judea, but Herod had none of it, and basically defeated Antigonus, even though Antigonus is the first one to actually end the Hasmonean rule, and basically now Herod now fights against Cleopatra, and the Cleopatra, that's what they write. Apparently, was a transient Arab. Well, basically, it was kind of like a combination of Arab and Greeks, or they call it Transinian Arabs, so to speak. So Herod defeats both, Cleopatra and the Transinian Arab population, and basically meets Antony and says, "Do you reaffirm my, which I have stated?" And Antony had reaffirmed his kingdom, and basically tries to rebuild the sanctuary, which we'll talk about, and I have a little video on the Second Temple. Rebuilds the temple and enlarges the temple. It wasn't completed in his lifetime, which is what actually 64 BCE. Up until 64 BCE, he doesn't finish it, but he does build a lot of palaces, and then most importantly, he builds a Caesarea, which would know actually becomes a mostly Greek city, even though it was built by Herod. And then basically, obviously, we all know that, Herod has, I don't know if he had a mental illness or he really didn't like a lot of the, court controversies of whenever there's going to be a little bit of controversy, a conflict, or people are lying against him, he would basically, he he have murdered his wives, his brother Pharisees, as Greg has mentioned, and
His sons,
sorry,
some
sorry.
of his two of his sons.
Two of his sons, and then even drives his second wife Doris, to kill herself, and then Antipater, her son, he tries and executes in the 4 BCE basically, and then around 4 BCE has a drastic decline. People don't know, I mean, obviously he probably has some kind of mental illness, but he dissipates pretty easily, and then Herod's son Archelaus declared king. But there is a problem between Jewish population and Archelaus, and he suppresses a lot of revolts that's happening. So the Jews have been revolting, since Greek times, even against the Herod's son, and basically, Archelaus calls on Varus, who was Roman governor of Syria, who marches on Jerusalem. And the kingdom was divided in such a way where Archelaus, who was Etrarch, had about half of the Judea. 1/4 belonged to the tetrarch named Philip, and Herod Antipas, as tetrarch, also had a 1/4. So the two of them had a quarter, and
Galilee.
yeah,
Galilee.
Galilee, correct. And then in the end, they basically, there was an imposter named Alexander that gets banished. Archelaus gets banished altogether. So therefore, he no longer has that. So
Okay.
anybody wants to add anything on Herod? Go ahead.
Yeah, the fourth one was sister of Herod, Salome, which she died fairly early, and that portion of tetrarchy went to Rome automatically. She, willed it to Rome. So yeah, there are only 3 of them. They're all 3 brothers, by the way, half brothers: Archelaus, Philip, and Antipas. And Antipas is the one that is featured in the New Testament.
Zach, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
What was everybody constantly revolting about? I mean, I'm sure life was hard, I get that, but what were all the revolts about? Why was there so much turmoil?
Roman rule was very
The
oppressive,
civil war. They're just fighting each other for power.
but there was also unrest among the population because the Romans were, Roman tax extraction was brutal. And the way that they did that was by tax farming, which is to say that, in other words, tax farmer would go to Rome and say, okay, I'll collect the taxes for you and I'll give you this much. And anything else that he could get, he could keep, and he would be provided with troops. So the population under Rome was squeezed very, very hard.
Well,
Rome
I
was not
agree, John
a
here,
good-
but there was
Rome was
also
not a good master.
there was also a big religious factor involved. You had the Pharisees and the Sadducees around the temple, certainly provided the ruling class, if I can call it that, but there were also the Zealots, which were these fanatical Jews who did believe in independence from Rome, but their main target was what they viewed as the corrupt corrupt leadership, and they wanted to return to a more primitive is the wrong word, but a purer form of Judaism, and that they provided the shock troops, as far as I can make out, for all the attacks on the Romans.
Sicarius also.
There is a question about the actual attitude of people like Josephus, how, in his heart was he anti-Roman, and he just submitted out of realpolitik. He had no choice. But there were true believers all over Judea who were agitating constantly.
I don't want to get ahead of the story, but
Yeah.
I think that Josephus really does provide a way so you can see how his mind changed, what changed his mind, and he's not a man. You know, I don't consider him a man who lost his honor.
He did some pretty creepy things. Well, let's not get ahead of it.
Yeah,
Right,
right.
right. That's later. We're not there yet.
Right.
Some amazing things.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, the Jewish population was incredibly factionalized, and that was really
Yeah.
the key to the whole thing.
Just to
Yeah,
give,
during this, well, I won't get ahead of it. It's amazing. They had a civil war in Jerusalem while Vespasian, Titus was besieging them, and that sort of thing. So,
Right.
A lot of Jews were Hellenized too.
so I just want to give a perspective to people. I mean, we all know, but basically there's just a timeline of very simple timeline, but let's just move on. So Judea under the Roman rule, right? So, fast forward a couple of years, the Pontius Pilate, as we know, appointed as, procurator of Judea by Tiberius, 26 CE. Right away, huge conflict, over grave images in Jerusalem. But, he relents, over the fact that there was, mass execution of Jews and that people, he basically just loses control over Jews, but we all know biblical stories. I don't want to get into it. But most importantly, a lot of his soldiers go, haywire and commit a lot of indecent gestures in the temples by putting up, the statues of Apollo and so forth, so on. And they just don't understand and grasp, obviously it's new to them that, Jews have their own religion and therefore they don't believe in idols. And so they basically create a problem where, they create freedom fighters or bandits. Greeks called them lestes, and we all know, there's Sicaries, Zealots come a little bit later, but, and I'll talk about who Sicaries are, but
Zach, I thought the Romans were supposedly pretty good about not, getting into the local culture, letting the local culture proceed on as is. But it sounds like in this case, Pontius Pilate was getting involved in local culture.
well, you couldn't really control your soldiers, and that's to me is a bad management, So if you can't control your soldiers, that maybe he would told them don't desecrate the temples, but they were kind of going in their own volition and did that. Or at least that's what Josephus writes, in a very, very light manner, because he doesn't want to offend Romans. So it's a lot of the things that we read from Josephus is you have to read between the lines, He
I don't think Tiberius had policy of violating a temple or anything like that. Not until Caligula, who was like crazy, there was like this major policy changes to like do this, do that. Yeah, just local.
In general,
So what was the graven images controversy? Was it that the Romans wanted to put up graven
you
images?
got to understand that both Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar were deified, and people prayed to them. Their statues were distributed throughout the empire, and it was a civic duty. It was, like the Pledge of Allegiance. So the question was, would Jews be forgiven for not doing that? And the Jews were fortunate to the extent that they could show that their belief system was very, very old, and the Romans had intrinsic respect for ancient traditions. So they could kind of negotiate their way through, but then somebody would come in, there'd be an incident, and it was always there that a Roman, someone in the Roman Empire should, make an offering to the statue of Augustus or Rome as a, as a generalized divine concept, so there was always that a
Okay, I
fault
get
line
it.
there that could blow up at any moment.
That I understand. I see now. So the Romans were putting up statues of Caesar and the The local population, and the
But
local population,
not in the temple though,
no, in their
until
own-
Caligula decided to put his own statue in the temple.
But I'm saying that the Romans, just in general, what they did was they would build a lot of their own stuff, and
yeah.
and so it was if you were supposed to come to their temple and give the offering to the divine Julius or to Roma.
Got it. And then
It was
also
the
with
Jews'
regard,
refusal to do that was the flashpoint.
that explains it. Thank you. And I wanted to also ask, at this point, since they've returned, since the Jewish population civilization has returned from Babylonia, at this point, the temple in the inner sanctum is basically an empty room, right? Because they don't have the ark anymore.
No, they do. Everything has been rebuilt by Herod.
No, but
not the
Not the
ark.
ark,
Yeah,
not
the
the
ark they
ark.
don't
The
have.
Holies is
But
empty.
ark was
sanctuary is
always
there.
hidden.
The Holy
not-
of the Holies
not
is
empty.
empty. It originally was, by the Torah, it contained the Ark of the Covenant,
Right.
right? But that's long gone.
And so it's basically just the Holy of Holies, and it's an empty room.
Pompey is quoted. Pompey went in there. When Pompey came through, he violated the temple and went into the Holy of Holies and said, "Hey, there's nothing here."
Wow.
Yep.
Right. And then, as I understand it, in terms of the way Jewish religion was organized, then the synagogues became more important. Not more important, maybe, but they became important.
Well, citizens, that's why citizens are important, because they are the ones that are, doing the teachings outside of the temple.
Right.
Why they had so many problems with other areas of, Jewish sects or political sects.
But
Political sects.
you have to appreciate that this is prior to biblical Judaism, right? The way that Judaism is organized now, the way it thinks, which is biblical Judaism, that didn't exist. That was created a few hundred years later.
Right.
But nonetheless, there were synagogues, however, right?
I
didn't
think
become
they've
prominent.
excavated a few of them, but they don't know what went on in them.
Well,
The only reason I say that is in the New Testament, in the gospel accounts, there are instances where Jesus preaches in the local synagogue, and it's described as such.
That is correct. You are right about that. But what we do know, it's a fact that all Jewish worship was centered on the temple in Jerusalem. They actually performed sacrifices of animals, which
Right.
is not done today, but it was
On a
an
huge
intrinsic
scale.
part of, it was very much like Mecca in Islam. It was the center of Jewish religious identity, one temple in
Right.
Jerusalem. And that all went away when the Romans destroyed it in 70 AD.
In many ways, the temple was a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an enormous amount of they had ways of venting the blood because it was in such copious amounts. You had to, build drainage systems.
Interesting.
And in a way that Jesus, when he went there and he turned over the tables with money exchanges, the money exchanges were done specifically to exchange it to shekels because you could buy the sacrificial animals only on shekels.
Yeah.
So you had to come there and exchange any foreign currency to local before you buy sacrificial animals.
Yeah. Now, as I understand it too, that actually there was a big system as well for then distributing the meat after the sacrifice. That was an entire, there was, it was sort of a temple economic system, so to speak. I mean, it wasn't like all of these animals just went up every day in an enormous holocaust to ashes. That a portion of them was sacrificed and the rest was sort of, distributed in some sort of system.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, maybe it was a distribution of kosher meat at the time.
Well, I mean, there is actually, there's very, very clear description of different types of sacrifice in the Bible, in Leviticus. And so there are some sacrifices where the victim is entirely consumed, and there are others where it's not. And also there was, I mean, it was very expensive to get a big animal in there. So there were a lot of birds, because that was like the cheapest way that you could make a sacrifice and fulfill the commandment.
That too is mentioned in the New Testament, because when Jesus and Mary and Joseph go up to the temple for to do worship, it's noted that Joseph and Mary could only afford to buy 2 doves or whatever it was, and that was a sign that they were definitely sort of working class people.
Yeah, normal people.
Yeah. Just to reiterate on this slide, as you can see, now Jews are getting in clashes with Samaritans. And who were the Samaritans? The Jews didn't consider Samaritans as Jews because they claim that they basically had their own temple at Mount Gerizim, at a true temple. So you can see a deviation from Judaism, and therefore the Galileans, who were the Jews, have found one of their comrades, so to speak, or brethren, killed by Samaritans, and now we have problems with Samaritans who are considered to be non-Jews because they don't pray in Jerusalem temple, fighting with the Jews from Galilee. And basically, bandit chief, or well, they call him bandit, Eleazar, leads the attack on the Samaritans. So there's many Eleazars in this story. There's probably at least 4 or 5. So let's just say this is Eleazar numero uno. So now we have Samaritans who are saying, well, this is not good. Let's find support from the governor of Syria, Umidus Quadratus, and basically, in this case, Umidus executes 18 Galilean Jews just to show an example. Basically, don't create problems. But Claudius, I'm sorry, finds Samaritans guilty.
You're talking about the Emperor Claudius?
Yes, Emperor Claudius finds Samaritans guilty. Claudius died in 54 CE, who was succeeded by Nero. And he basically says that not the Galilean Jews are guilty, but Samaritans. So I just want to show that the Romans don't really support one side or the other at this point, and they're just going back and forth. And they don't know, they're really getting their hands full with a very complicated Middle East issue. This is probably worse than Palestinian-Israeli conflict, so to speak.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things about history is the Romans had such a successful empire, but they took almost no interest in the cultures or languages of their conquered provinces. I mean, Roman aristocrats did not learn Hebrew or Gaulish.
Learn Greek.
It's really interesting. It tells you something about expert knowledge may not be so important to running an empire, but there's no evidence the Romans ever were interested, except in the signal exception, of course, is Greece. That Greece was the California of the time, at least the way California used to be. It was the cool culture. So,
right.
But Romans probably had the dimmest, Roman leadership, Pontius Pilate probably had the dimmest idea of what was actually going on among the Jews.
Yeah, and that was their downfall. I'm not downfall, but in this case, it was Jewish downfall. But according to Josephus, not my opinion. This is Josephus' opinion. I'm presenting his. And anyway, at this time we see Sakari rising at this round point, who are basically, there's a lot of atrocities committed by Sakari in Jerusalem. And we also see a lot of false messiahs come in around the same time, according to Josephus, and claiming that they this they're the God's sons and whatnot. So now,
Sicarius was just the word for bandit or thug. It's still the word in Spanish, I believe, Sicario.
correct.
Somebody can correct me. I mean, it's not a
No,
political designation.
not Spanish, Latin probably.
Oh, it was in Latin as Sicarius, but it's still in present-day Spanish, Sicario,
Oh, present. Yeah.
meaning generally thug.
Here, I just want I'm sorry, John.
Oh, no, no,
Yeah, I just want to basically show the an Old Testament, a creation of things. So just whenever there's something we're going to talk about, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Joshua, Judges, and where everything is basically stems from. It's just a FYI type of thing. Sorry. All right. So what was the war cloud? What preceded the war? What happened? Basically. So after the Pontius Pilate, a little bit later, in 64, 66, Cisaus Florus becomes a procurator of the Judea. He engages in violence and basically invades cities and condones lawlessness of the bandits. So you're just basically all for taking. Now, a year later, we have Cestius Gallus, who is a legate in Syria, and the people appeal to him for help against the Florists. They say, listen, when he visits to Jerusalem. So Cestius Gallus comes from Syria, and Jews are appealing to him, like, help us against Florists. He's just condoning all this lawlessness, and we can get it. It's been a havoc. Now, Cestius promises the crowd more reasonable conduct. Secretly, though, Florus, knowing his own position is in danger, desires insurrection as it plays into his hands to promote plunder and divert attention from his own crimes. So we have Cestius Florus committing all these crimes, but then basically try to divert attention from this by desiring their direction. Now, local war breaks out in May and June 66 CE, in 12th year of Nero reign in Caesarea, and while Florus is governor. After Greeks secure control of Caesarea, attempts to build a factory immediately next to and blocking a synagogue. Here we have officially basically Greeks now blocking synagogue by building a factory and something that, and the Jews rebel. With Florus' tacit approval, now he's saying, I'm going to support Jews, and desecration occurs, or this is at least according to Josephus. Basically, but Florus uses this and goes on and begins to draw on a temple treasury, and he's publicly mocked by Jews. So he goes in and basically, try to steal money. And Florus is responsible for many atrocities committed against the Jews, including crucifixions. So he's been playing both sides and, trying to create havoc so he can steal money from temples. Now, King Agrippa II goes to Alexandria, and his sister Berenice begs unsuccessfully to Florus to put a stop to the slaughter. So, but she barely escapes with her life. Agrippa was obviously the king of Jews. The chief priests quell the riots and appeal to the people not to provoke Romans further. But Florus has the Roman soldiers attack the rebellious Jews who are driven into temple, and Antonia, a fortress in contact with the northern and western colonies surrounding the temple. I'll show that once we get to that as well. So now King Herod Agrippa II gives an impassioned speech to his people, constantly against the futile war. Now he's kind of giving like a Josephus speech. He's saying German, Spanish, Black Sea Scythians, Asia Minor inhabitants, Thracians, Illyrians, Carthaginians, Egyptians, and other conquered people now ruled by Rome. No one will come to their aid. God is on the side of Romans. Otherwise, so vast an army could have never been built. Play it safe. Don't sail into hurricane. Their uprising will endanger the lives of Jews and colonies throughout the known world, as subsequently occurs in Syria and Alexandria. Spare the temple, which had been protected by Romans, though the people say they only want to fight Florus. Agrippa says there is no way to prevent that from being a fight with Rome. So they're saying, we're just going to fight with Florus, who is the governor. We're not going to fight Rome. Let us do it. He meets with temporary, he meets with temporary success, but he's soon banished from the city by the mob. Mob loses control because now this guy Florus had crossed the line completely. So any questions?
Can I give a little background of who King Agrippa II was?
Yeah, but I have Sergio. Sergio needs to drop out in 30 minutes. So quickly, please. Sorry.
Well, it's okay. It's not that important. Let's go on.
Yeah, because I need Sergio to present
Sure.
on something. I apologize. He needs to go to work. All right. So the outbreak of war. So now, in outbreak of war, we have Sicarii who basically attacking the Masada. Who are Sicaries? They're named for a dagger carried in their bosoms. So basically, it's a dagger that they carry in their bosoms. That's why they're named Sicarii. And Sicaries were led by a so-called named Menahem, exterminating the Roman garrison there. So they go to Masada and they lock themselves and they exterminate all the Roman garrison there. Eleazar, which is another Eleazar, son of Ananias, and now I'm going to be saying son of, because that's how identify in Judaism. At the temple provokes Romans by abolishing sacrifices offered by Rome or Caesar. His followers will be termed by zealots. So now he's saying, now I'm going to go ahead and provoke the Romans because we're going to really incite the war here. In opposition to the revolt, 7 days of mutual slaughter, High Priest Ananias murdered, dissensions and insurgents, Menahem slain, Roman soldiers slain after a guarantee of safe conduct. They're telling Roman soldiers, I know we're revolting, but you can leave in safe conduct, but they slaughter them. Slaughter of Jews of Caesarea also happened. So now in response, Romans killed Jews in Caesarea. Destruction of the cities, Jews killed in Syria. Jews attacking Jews. Anti-Jewish purges in Sinopolis, Ashkelon, Ptolemais, Tyre. Ambassadors from Batanea come through Agrippa court, are slain by order of Naurus, serving in place of the absent king Neron the Agrippa II. Hold on. Somebody's trying to get in. Anyway, so King Agrippa now fails in negotiations with the Jews to avert war with Romans. Cestius pauses outside of Jerusalem, delays attacking the call of his men, and retreats ignominiously. Jews captured Roman machines and celebrate the victory. So, Greg, if you want to give a couple of minutes, who is Agrippa?
Well, Agrippa II is the son of Agrippa I, who is had pretty interesting story. He is grandson of Herod the Great, and they call Herod Agrippa. So he's son of his Aristobulus IV, who Herod the Great executed his son. But his grandson he sent to Rome, and he grew up. And I'm talking about father of Agrippa II, and he was named Herod Agrippa in the name of Marcus Agrippa, Augustus' famous general. And he grew up basically with Emperor Claudius, and Drusus, and actually also became a friend of Caligula, and supposedly even helped him. And eventually Caligula appointed him a king of all Israel. We're talking about the lands of all Tetrarchy except Jerusalem. So he was like really a king of the whole thing until 44 when he died. And at that point, 44 AD, his son Agrippa II came. So he's a great grandson of Herod the Great, from actually the Hasmonean line, because Aristobulus was son of Mariamne, the Hasmonean princess who married Herod the Great. And he tried, well, all of these kings, obviously, Herod the First and his son, they grew up mostly in Rome, and they were very much injected with Roman culture, and he was a Roman ally in a way, tried to avert the war between Jews and Romans. That's all.
Quick question. Thanks, Greg. Quick question, Dak. You have a picture here on this slide that I think is a picture of while the Israelites were in the desert, right? That's the way the setup was when every night that they stopped and they set up the Ark of the Covenant within sort of a movable enclosure. So I'm wondering, does that relate to any of these war things here?
No, just one point. I basically a fill in the blanks type of thing. That what are the Jews fighting for?
Okay. Makes sense.
There's a lot of things like I mean, sometimes I have faces of Titus and Vespasian. Sometimes I just want to show what are the what was it worth fighting for.
Great,
This is
thank
the
you.
image of the Mishkan in the desert.
Right, exactly.
This is the portable temple that the Jews, according to Exodus, would disassemble every day in March. And then put
Right, you can see, and of course, in this picture, they still have the Ark of the Covenant,
exactly.
and you can see the presence of God there sort of depicted.
Right.
It raised interest. Most important for me is to raise a discussion. Anyway, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks, Greg. So now, before we get to the coming of Vespasian and Titus, I just want to talk a little bit about Josephus. Again, he writes about these things, right? We don't know what's true, what's not true. A lot of the things he writes about himself, especially Jews or antiquity or the Jewish wars and stuff like that. So now Josephus is given an important role during this revolt, right? So initially, with the fighting going on in Jerusalem, where you have zealots fighting, and Sicaries fighting, Sadducees and and Samaritans are being kicked out, and Idumeans are being brought into the city to fight on the side of zealots very sneakily, which I'll talk about it. But we have many Jews now fleeing Jerusalem. They're like, we don't want any part of this. I gotta get out of here. They know the disaster is coming. The Jews in Damascus are slaughtered, right? So now we have a retaliation by Romans. So now Jews elect Joseph, son of Gorion and Ananus, to lead the city first, and then Eleazar, son of Simon, and his zealot followers gradually rise to power. Josephus, which is the author, is appointed commander in Galilee region. Josephus organized the military in Galilee. The plot, then there was the plotter who was John the Gischala, appears and plunders Galilee. So Joseph was trying to organize the defense according to him, and there's people that oppose to him. This guy John from Gischala is opposing to him and plunders Galilee and tries to kill Josephus. Now King Agrippa, minister, Ptolemy is robbed, on the way. So now people are rebelling against Agrippa. But this guy, anti-Josephus mob that in Galilee is, basically is being charged with treason because Joseph was trying to get control of the Galilee and, protect, and build the wall and call it Tarichaya, which is the city close to Japata. Now, this guy, John, that's against Josephus, plots against Josephus, and tried to get him assassinated, develops further plots. Josephus, you'll see that John is going to come important later. Josephus, entraps pro-Roman Tiberians, allows Tiberians to be pillaged as well as, just pillage. Galilean dissension has been quelled. So basically, Josephus now attacking pro-Roman Tiberians, and therefore inciting further, problems. So that whole thing that's happening with everybody's revolting, Vespasian is trying to basically come in and get a control of this. And now we have Agrippa's being attacked. His minister is being, mobbed and stuff like that. So we have full revolt going on. So now Vespasian with his two sons arrives. Vespasian has a Titus as his son. We know he's going to be future Roman emperor, and Domitian. Yeah. So so what does Vespasian do basically? Vespasian assigns 15 legion in the command of Titus and saying here, basically brings in the, first of all, he's being assigned by Nero. You could say that Nero sent him to Siberia because apparently, and this is not in the book, but apparently Nero was an avid musician, and at one of his performances, Vespasian fell asleep, and he wanted to send him to the worst area possible. And what's the best way to do it? Let's send him to Judea. So basically, it was like not an exile, but let me get you off my eyes. How dare you to sleep at my performances? Anyway,
it ended up being the key reason that Vespasian became emperor.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that he was all the way out there, all the other contenders fought it out while Vespasian waited it out, and he was the only guy left when he came to Rome.
Correct.
But he also was a famed general by that time, old general, because he was pretty famous at the Britain campaign and the Emperor Claudius time.
That is correct. He was a professional army general, and he advertised that he had no political ambitions, so he was always pretty safe. But
he was a pretty honest man as emperor, as emperors go.
Right. So basically, Vespasian, I'm sorry, you guys, I apologize. So Vespasian arrives in Antioch, which is the capital of Syria, meets King Agrippa. First, he wants to get the lay of the land, and then the people of Sepphoris petition for his help against the countryman. So we have other Jews that basically saying, "Oh, help us against this revolting people." Maybe some Samaritans and Sadducees, and so to speak. So now Romans attack Galilee, starting with Sepphoris, which is the city. Titus joins up with Vespasian with his forces, which is he's leading 15th Legion. So now detailed description of the Roman military, and I want to give a way to my friend Sergio. He's going to talk about a little bit of Roman military because that's part of Joseph's explanation. Sergio, are you around? Hello.
I'm mute.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? My Wi-Fi is not great here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sound great.
All right, good. All right, awesome. So, all right. So basically these fortresses and these city walls, a lot of these ancient cities have, the main reason is to hold off a large army, right? A large army that most likely would outnumber your army or is a lot better trained than your army or has a lot more technology than the current army, which is pretty much the case of the Romans. Although I won't say they're always outnumbered their opponents. A lot of times the Roman armies fought other armies that were They were outnumbered, and yet they still were victorious simply for the fact that they were a lot better trained and they had technology that surpassed anyone else's at the time. So in this case, as you said, Titus commanded the 15th and the 12th Legion, and they were also accompanied by the 5th and the 10th Legion later. So this was a massive campaign. Okay, and we're going to say each legion had around 4,500 to 5,000 men, give or take. That's not including the auxiliary forces, which might have been another 1,000. So this could have been anywhere around 20,000 men alone, plus their animals and their supply wagons and stuff like that. So this is a huge, huge, huge campaign. And
Sergio,
Yeah.
would they have arrived via land or by ship?
Oh, I mean, by land for sure. Yeah.
Mm.
They came from Macedonia. They came from other parts of the Roman Empire. I mean, maybe at some point they might have went by sea, but for the most part, when they stormed up for Judea, they most likely would have had to go by foot and horses, those who were fortunate enough to have horses. But yeah, this was a land campaign by all means.
Just
And
wanted to
That's why
say-
the Roman, that's why the Roman roads were such a big deal.
Yeah, but they didn't arrive all from Italy. There were a lot of them
No.
stationed in Syria,
right.
in Egypt, so they didn't have to go very far. You
So
know,
Syria
That makes
was-
sense.
Syria, the capital of Syria was Antioch, which was one of the largest cities in the east. So that was really a very large place, an important place.
Got it.
Correct. And that's the whole idea of having these specific legions stationed in different parts. For example, the 12th Legion was based in Macedonia, which is a very strategic point. You know, they could disperse that army whenever they need to. The 10th Legion was mostly in Judea for a long time. So a lot of them didn't have to travel so far, as Paul pointed out. But yeah, it still was a massive exodus. And
I would
well-
think the other thing too is they'd have to be used to, these sort of Middle Eastern desert kind of campaigning, which would have been very different from Northern European, snow campaigning. It's the same issues we ran into during the Iran war, where you had to equip everybody completely differently.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. They were definitely training for this all year round. In fact, I would say a lot of the legionnaires were, although they had to be Roman citizens, they still would have been nationalities of that area. They wouldn't all necessarily been Italian for that matter.
And they were people that were signing up for a 20-year hitch. Right?
Yeah.
So these were professional soldiers. They had said, this is what I'm going to do for 20 years.
And if you're an auxiliary, you would be 25 years before you could get citizenship. So yeah, this was a long commitment. But anyway, getting back to the siege. So basically, there's two ways to go about it. One, you could storm a city or a fortress until they run out of supplies and food and water until they surrender, right? That would be an ideal situation. The second way, you have to breach the walls. And that's when things get ugly, right? So first and foremost, they have to set up their camps, all right? Like as I said, let's say it's 20,000 men. They have to set up their home for the next month or so, because this could take a period of time. Now, each legionnaire at this point was carrying a good amount of equipment himself personally. If you look at the illustration on the upper right, the legionnaire, although he's a little later than this point in time because of his armor, but generally the equipment would have been similar. So he has a pole, as you can see, he's holding on his shoulder. It's called a furca, which is Latin for the word fork, because it used to look like a fork. Now it's more like a crossbar. But he has all his equipment there. He's got another change of military boots, which is the kalagai, the sandals that they wear. He would have another tunic, some food like dried cured meats, cheeses, perhaps some fruit, and then other cooking equipment and stuff like that. And as you can see, he also has tools. Now, the legionnaire was just as much as a builder as he was a soldier, if not more. The soldier spent a lot of time with his dolabra, which is the axe, the pickaxe, than his actual sword, the gladius. They were constantly building all the time, anything from trenches to palisades to even short bridges. They were crafty soldiers, unlike later in in history, the soldier was pretty much a builder most of his professional career. I would say more building than actual fighting. So the tools were very, very essential in everyday Roman soldier life. And what's also important is that they carried their own equipment. Although they carried everything, they still had additional help. In fact, every 8 soldiers, which was known as a contubernium, this was a group of soldiers that shared a tent together, would have an additional slave and a mule to help out with more loads. Okay, so there was, think about that. You have every 8 soldiers had an animal, mule, and a slave. So that brings the number from 20,000 to a huge number more. And the importance of feeding these men and their animals is extremely crucial. So basically, they brought most of their stuff with them, as you said earlier, and that they didn't have opportunities like they did in Germania or Britannia or parts of Spain where they could forage food or look for rivers. No, this was not the case here. They had to bring most of their supply with them. Now, they had cargo vans going back and forth once they set up their camps, but it was very, very instrumental that they had an ample amount of food and water, especially in these desert climates. Now, once they build their camps, typically the tents themselves were made of goat hide, which is a thick leather. Although I'm not sure if that was the case in Judea, because I don't know, but leather gets really warm, and if you go under there on the hot sun, it's going to get really hot.
That's exactly what I was thinking as I looked at that picture, and why I asked the question about, you know, you had to equip differently in a desert environment.
Yes, I agree with that. And again, we don't know if they used another material. We do know we found a lot of goat hide. So a lot of the leather that they use, for example, if you look at the illustration, he has a shield that's brown. He has another a cover on the shield. It's a leather goat cover made of goat hide with beeswax on it. And this is so that when it rains, it doesn't warp the wood, because that's what happens. So the leather that they used constantly was goat hide. And yeah, as I mentioned, again, I kind of struggle with the fact that they would have used leather in the desert like that, but we don't know. Who knows? Maybe they had a way of cooling themselves when it got too hot.
You know, the other major issue we had, we the USA, when in the Iran war, Iraq war, what am I saying, Iran war, was water. Water was huge. And of course, you know, the way we did it was bottled water. And I mean, there were there were water bottling plants built, all that. Was water an issue in this instance?
No, it was not. They were able to get ample supply of water. As you can see, that little thing on the right of the tent, which is an amphora. You all know what an amphora is. Basically, it's a container where they would ship all types of stuff, from wine to grains and so on. So they would have constant supplies going back and forth regularly. Now, I wouldn't say they had a lot of water, but they had water. If they could not get enough supply of water, they probably would postpone that campaign.
They'd be done. But that must have been
also be aware that they, you know, that they're really not fighting in the desert. This is not a desert.
True.
The Galilee is very wet and very lush. And
yes.
Even around Jerusalem, okay, it's dry, but you're not in the high desert. You know?
Okay.
People live there in large numbers.
Okay. So,
you know,
but not in Masada. In Masada, it's another story. But yeah, you're
Masada's
right.
on the desert. That's right.
Yeah.
The desert is close by, but you know,
correct.
But there's a sea coast that runs in about 15, 20 miles all the way around the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
If not
because
a lot more.
Water for that many people would be an issue if it was all, if at all, in short supply naturally.
Mm-hmm.
The other side, though, is to realize that this was, you know, this was a professional army that had stable organization. So they had logistics, as, you know, they understood that this was one of the responsibilities of an army, that you know, there were dedicated people to that who had learned how to do it with an institutional memory going back hundreds of years.
That's correct. I would say it was all logistics and maybe 10% fighting. I mean, you didn't have to be strong, you didn't have to be tall, you didn't have to be fast. As long as you're able to follow a command and you knew how to do your job, you were going to be successful. And that's pretty much what made the Roman army what it was. So another a concept that they had was they brought the grain with them, and they brought this little thing. I don't know if the picture comes out clear, but it's basically a grain mill, right? It's two stones that are flat, kind of like a disc shape with a handle on them, and they would put the grain on the middle part, that hole in the middle, and they would grind it. And that's how they would make the flour, and then they would bake bread daily. They would, each of the 8 soldiers in the Canterbury, one of them would be in charge of doing this on a day. It would take almost 8 hours to do this, to feed the whole Canterbury, the group of 8. So again, this is another little detail of how important their logistics was. It wasn't just about their weapons and their tools. It was about their food supply and who was going to be in charge of what and how they got things done. And a lot of armies failed to comprehend this, but not the Romans. The Romans, if you threw a spear at them, they would throw it back a lot more refined, dipped in bronze. Okay, that's pretty much how they did. They copied everything from their enemies, from their subjects. Right. They improved it, and they made it work for them. And that's really what makes the Roman army so successful. So let's go to the next slide, if we can. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What was the chance of survival if you enlisted, let's say when you were 16 years old? What was the chance you got out the other end after the 20 years were up?
18 years old. Yeah, that's a really good question. It all depends. I mean, just life expectancy at that time wasn't that long. So I would say that most legionnaires survived getting killed in battle. I'm not saying they always survived battles, but for the most part, like I said, they spend most of their time campaigning, marching, building. That's what it was. Just look at it as soldiers in today's army. Most of the soldiers, they're just stations, and they're there to keep things in check. And that's pretty much the case there. Now, there were wars, sure, and those pretty got bloody. But overall, in the a little under 1,000 years, most of the soldiers would have survived that. Now, if they got killed by another form of illness or something like that, then that's another story. But yeah, I would say for the most part, most soldiers would have lived to see their retirement and get their pension. Yeah. Zach, wasn't there another slide of the camp? Or was that it?
Yeah, well, there's the camp on the left. Right here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't see your picture. Yeah, I wanted to just point out the soldier with that little cross, that little invention. Now, what that is, that's a groma. Okay, it's a Greek invention, and he's called a grammatis. And what that is, he's basically a land surveyor. Okay, so the soldiers, they were not just builders, but some of them were assigned specific duties. They had specialties. Some might have been architects themselves, engineers, carpenters, and you name it. He pretty much is the one that decides where they're going to set up their camp, and he's going to measure the land. So the way that works is basically he lines up the 2 lead balls on there, and there'll be another soldier that would be on a distance with 2 poles. He'll line up those 2 poles together based on how he views it, and that's how they make a perfectly straight line. And why I think this is important to discuss is that this gives you a clear understanding how precise, how disciplined, and how advanced the Romans are. Even just building a camp. Like most people just, all right, this is fine. No, they look for it where it's geographically advantageous, strategically advantageous, and they also build it like they're going to build a 10-story building like the Colosseum, something like that. So this is
quite
like,
a lot of
again,
literature on this. So that I mean, every camp was built the same way throughout the whole Roman Empire. There was a right way to do it, and so there were 2 main streets, and the commander's tent was in the intersection of these 2 main streets. And whenever the soldiers would enter the camp, they know exactly where they had to go to start, erecting their structure.
right, exactly right. Yeah, whatever you woke up, wherever. If you didn't know where you were, you knew who your soldier buddy was to the right and to the left, and where your weapons were and so forth. So yeah, it's like walking into a Home Depot. You should know where the plumbing is versus the engineering and the building materials. They're all lined properly. But anyway, okay. So yeah, so that's basically the structure of the camp, or the permanent. They had permanent ones, but this is a temporary one. This is called a marching camp, a castra, and this would be anywhere from a day to a month, and so on. All right, so now let's talk about the siege warfare, when they can't actually penetrate the or they want to breach the forces. Okay, so these are some of the artillery weapons. The one on the top right is called an onager, and basically it's like a medieval catapult. It throws projectiles over city walls or fortresses. Usually it was just boulders, rocks, that kind of things. And it's pretty effective. They would have numerous these. Now, these things, they wouldn't build on site. They would have them already pre-assembled. It would be cut, and then they would assemble them whenever they were. This is something that most likely the mules and the horses would have brought with them in wagons. The one to the right is a ballista. That's similar to as the onager. However, this is more like a crossbow. It shoots huge bolts. And sometimes even rocks. There's two similar type of weapons, a ballista and a scorpia, but they're similar like that. That's also a Greek invention, and it was pretty effective. They came in different sizes. This one would have been fairly large, maybe 20, 30 feet high. There's been some reenactments or reconstructions of one, and they were pretty vicious. It's a torsion weapon. The ropes on there would have been made of hemp or horsehair. Yeah, horsehair. Now, the picture on the bottom right, sorry, I meant to make that one larger. If you could see, that's basically a siege tower. And again, that's a long structure with different stories in it. And this is when they're feeling comfortable to now confront the actual fortress against the attacker or the defenders. And as you can see, there's soldiers on above and inside the moving siege tower. Now, one of the ways you could try to destroy that is that you would try to burn it if you're one of the defenders of this fortress. And so they would have hides that were wet, or they would have oil, something that's not flammable, so that if they tried to throw, let's say, a Greek fire or something flammable, so it go up in flames, because the whole thing was made of wood, it wouldn't catch on so quickly. So this was obviously something made to be well protected, and obviously, be the final steps of breaching the fortress. And one last thing, they also built ramps. Okay, so this thing, it's going upward, although it doesn't really necessarily look like that. As I said, the soldier was a builder, and he knew about entrenching, he knew about digging, he knew about all these types of projects. So they would dig, and build ramps made out of earth and sometimes timber, so that they can march upward. So the combination with the ramp and a siege tower will allow them to breach the walls or where the fortress is, and then that's when they really start to attack, and things got really out of hand then. So
Quick question, Sergio. I assume that these ballistic kind of things, like the ballista and the other thing, that they were kind of blunt instruments. I mean, I'm assuming they didn't have sort of the advanced ballistic trajectory mathematics going on, about, hurling the thing and projecting where it's going to land. I'm assuming they just drew up as close as they could and started slingshotting this stuff.
Well, you got to
Yes,
imagine
yeah.
that
As
these
far as
guys are
accuracy-
professionals. They practice this. They really, I would imagine, know exactly what their weapons could do.
Well, I'm sure they did, but I imagine these weapons had to be placed pretty closely.
They
Well,
can certainly shoot,
and I think you're
throw
both right.
things for 50 or 100 yards.
Well, we know Archimedes lived more than 200 years before, maybe like 300 years before. So all of these calculations were already available. So I don't know. The legend usually had all kinds of engineers there who were familiar with ballistics. I don't know how much they used it. So, but I have no doubt that they were familiar with the ballistic theories.
Yeah.
Well, my opinion, and I'm not an expert in this. I would say that I think you're both right. They were not accurate. However, they were not just having one or two of these in the field. They might have had a whole set of these. So you think of the onager, for example, the little catapult. They would have had at least 8 of these in front of the area they're trying to attack. So imagine 80 of these going out at the same time. They're likely to hit certain targets, or at least destroy a certain part of the structure. and they were definitely effective. No, but you're right. If they just fired one from a far away range, they probably would not necessarily do the damage that they
Yeah.
wanted. But they were people of numbers. They were.
I think
Now,
the ultimate objective of those weapons in the siege is to just, knock a hole in the wall.
well,
So
right.
you just, you just go again, and I mean, that's the whole idea. You're out there, you're not risking your life. So you just keep firing at it until there's, the walls fall down, and if you can clear the people off the ramparts, with other artillery, it just,
Yeah.
that's
Got it.
that's how
Sure.
it works.
Now the ballista, what was that firing? I don't see what exactly.
Mostly bolts. It was almost like a giant sized crossbow, and in which,
Interesting.
yeah, if you look at it, it just so the it has these two.
Oh, I see.
You pull it back, and there's a
Back-
ratchet.
I see. Yeah.
You can put a lot of pressure in those. And I've seen an
would
image,
this have
although I
been
don't know
good
how
enough?
accurate it is.
Would this have been good enough to be like a sniper weapon? I mean, could you pick? I mean, it looks like something you'd have to hit individuals with it.
It was more like a missile launcher, like you just fire a rocket, but they would just
Yeah, but
giant
it doesn't explode. It's just
no, it does not
just one
explode.
thing.
It's just a giant dart thrown at you.
Yes,
Just imagine
right.
a
So you have
spear.
to hit something with it.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Usually in an open battle, it would be more
Yes,
Right?
effective
Where you have
in
a
an
crowd
open
of
battle.
people and shoot it into the crack.
Yeah.
I saw another illustration. I don't know how accurate it is, but they would actually have ballistas inside the siege tower. So imagine every ballista in each of the floors, just as another form of a weapon to shoot in there. Again, I don't know. Yeah.
because-
So these
because-
things, it could go up and down, side to side. The Oninger only just goes one direction. Oh, if you have to move the whole apparatus. This could actually swivel. This is actually pivots. So it's a pretty versatile weapon. Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
do any sapping, like going under the walls?
Yes, they did that too.
I'm sorry. What did you ask?
Did they ever do any sapping going under the walls? Did they have any explosives?
Yeah.
No explosives. No, not
No,
that I
not
know of. In
explosive,
ancient
but
world.
they did
They
sapping.
did mine under the walls
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, under the
Oh
walls they
yes,
did.
trenching. Yes.
They did
I don't think they
undermine
did
the
a whole lot
walls
of
and they would
that.
collapse it without explosives.
Yeah. They didn't. That wasn't their main form of a siege, but yes, they definitely would have practiced that. I mean, yeah, they do whatever had to be done.
They were entirely pragmatic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. So that's basically my little insert for the Roman camps. And I'd love to do a whole presentation. I could talk hours about the whole camp and the whole logistics and the whole equipment, and maybe another time. But now I'll just pass it back to you, Zach.
Awesome. Thank you, Sergio.
That was great. Thank you, Sergio. I appreciate
Oh, my pleasure.
that.
Aloha.
Definitely, my unpreparedness had been masked by this. All right.
Mhm.
Anyway, so now Josephus sees all this massive attack, and basically, is trembling at this point. And according to him, sent somebody to Jerusalem and to ask them, listen, this is gonna be too much. I just lost Jaffa. I'm in Yopata, and they are basically attacking, and their siege weapon is overwhelming. Can we make peace with them? And they told him, obviously, absolutely not. You're our general, or whatever, you are our commander. You gotta stay there. So anyway, I mean, we know all the story. Basically, he somehow tells Vespasian that it's going to take him 47 days to enter the city. And then he hides in the dungeon when Vespasian enters the city of Japata, massacres everybody. And Josephus hides with about 70 or 60 of his comrades in the dungeon. And basically, there's something that's called Josephus' Law, where he suggests that every second person should execute themselves in order not to give up to the Vespasian. But he was spotted, I guess, going into the dungeon, and some of the Roman soldiers wanted to throw flames inside the dungeon to kill everybody, and apparently got stopped by Vespasian, and then basically in the end, Josephus and his other friend, are staying alive and give up themselves. And now Vespasian, and Josephus is in the prison, and he basically keeps saying that Vespasian is going to be an emperor at a certain point. And I mean, it may have been hard to predict, but Nero was kind of like coming to the end of his reign. Maybe Josephus somehow got a word that this was happening. I don't know. Somehow he predicted that Vespasian is going to be an emperor. And, obviously Vespasian said, well, I like your, after he became an emperor, I like your predictability, but let's get to that in a second. So Josephus is saved, but now Josephus is used as the intermediary, since he knows Hebrew, he knows Aramaic. In fact, the Jewish wars were actually written in Aramaic and and Latin, but the Aramaic version didn't survive. So that's unfortunate. So now,
Just Zach, isn't it the case that Josephus had spent some time in Rome prior to
yes,
the rebellion?
he was in Rome as former ambassador, and he made a lot of strides toward very notable women in Rome, and that saved them as well. Apparently, they put a good word in for him to not to be.
Also, that meant that he spoke fluent Latin and he knew how to interact with Romans.
Correct. Yes, he was some kind of ambassador there. I don't particularly know, but then again, that's Josephus writing about Josephus. So now Vespasian, going further, kills people. Desecrate the cities, and as he gets to Jerusalem, he finds out that Nero had passed away, and there was about 4 different emperors, and the way it went, basically, the way it went is the first, Nero dies, then it goes from emperor to emperor, gets to this guy Otto, who becomes the emperor, but and then follows by Vitellius, and then Vespasian says he's not equipped to be an emperor, and therefore the soldiers themselves elect Vespasian, and he just enters basically the city without, so to speak, without any war, and becomes an emperor. And but he was about at the outskirts of Jerusalem when this was happening. In any case.
So this is known as the year of the 4 emperors.
Correct. The year of the four. Correct.
What year is it?
70 or something?
Yeah,
70 AD.
69.
Okay.
68, 69, between
69.
68 and 69.
Great, thank you.
Now, the thing is that, let me just get. All right. So before I talk about the temple and conquering of Jerusalem, I want you to take a look at a 1-minute movie and how the temple would have looked that Herod built. Okay. So let me know if you guys can see the picture. I'm going to put it on. Hopefully it will start. Here, it's starting. This was basically Jerusalem temple. Sorry about that. So once
was created by Immersive History, who currently is working on.
Sorry, guys. Oops.
Some really cool VR.
I somehow I don't find that to be a really convincing view of what the temple was like, because it's just was so cleaned up and so immaculate. The temple was this hiving, thriving place filled with people all the time and conducting business.
Yeah, but it just obviously was the I guess
I'm just saying that you get this impression of this, this immaculate place, um,
yeah. I mean, I just found the best I could describe.
I'm just, yeah.
Yeah. So now I want to somebody just said. All right. So now I just wanted to talk about a little bit of description, because we're going to talk about penetration on three walls. So the lengthy description of Jerusalem, the three walls revives upper, lower city of citadel, valley of the cheese markets, fountain of Siloam, old wall, Hippocrates Tower, gymnasium, Essene Gate, and they have their own gate, I guess. Solomon Pool, second wall, Prefinus Tower, Kidron Valley, Antonia, which I was talking about, Antonia, New City, third wall, Fazel Tower, Mariam Tower, and the King's Palace. Then the three different parts.
Zach, now by lengthy description, do you mean this was a lengthy description of Jerusalem by Josephus?
Yes, this was in Josephus.
Okay, great, thank you.
By the way, Antonia was the fortress that adjacent to the temple built by Herod.
Right. So the three most important, or the other three important pieces was innermost chamber, which is Holy of the Holies, which Anne was talking about. They had the replica, I guess, of the covenant, and this was empty room, I guess, in that case. Then you had a sanctuary containing lampstand, table, and altar, which all ended up in Rome, obviously. And then court of women, which is obviously separate entrance for them. And what's interesting, sufferers of venereal diseases were barred from the city, menstruating women from the temple, and even when the clean were limited to their access. So it was really limited to women. So okay. So now basically now we come to the to the hold on. Yeah, capture of the two walls. So now we have, one second. So Simon's partisans and John, remember the John I mentioned that rebelled against Josephus, basically, and his zealots continue to fight each other even when the Romans are close to the city. So you have a strife in the city. You have zealots fighting, Sadducees and all kind of factions fighting each other. But then when Romans are close to the city, coming close, they're united in this case. But Titus hires Josephus to speak on his behalf. And, Josephus states, God was blinding the eyes of the partisans because they were losing the fight at the second wall. And it said, blinding the eyes of the partisans, Shaw did not see the famine coming and welcoming destruction of the people. Josephus makes more appeals to the people. He appeals to reliance on God, says that they're fighting against God because they're fighting against Rome, and they're saying they're fighting against God. He recounts past episodes of Jewish subjugation in which force of arms had not succeeded, not with Egyptians, not with Babylonians, not with Antioch Epiphanes, not with Pompey. Jewish nation was never intended to bear arms, he's saying. The Romans are only expecting the customary tribute. Josephus states he's willing to sacrifice his mother, wife, children, even his own life in order to persuade people to relent. So basically he approached very closely to the wall, not close enough for the, to be shot down, but they can hear him, and he said those things, so to speak. So now, we come to the, conquest and, horrors of the, siege. And, obviously everybody heard the arrows, stories of famine, arrows, many daughters of Eleazar eats, Mary, the daughter of Eleazar, eats her own baby, newborn baby, basically. This abomination leads to Titus to hire resolve to destroy the city. Titus comes close to the city and says, you guys brought it up on yourself. I'm not taking any responsibility. This is the wrath of God. And stuff like that. And that's Antonia Fortress is being captured, and then the temple is being burned. They're saying about 1.1 million people have been perished. Tacitus estimates about 600 were under siege, and John and Simon were both captured. And then there was cleaning up operation, where they killed another 3,000 Jews in this Macarius built by Alexander. So the Jerusalem was basically destroyed completely in that regard. And now Roman celebrates, we destroyed them, they take all the spoils, the golden table, lampstand, Jewish laws, the part of Siddur, and Simon Sounds Gorias are being executed and taken all to Rome and stuff like that. So then we come to Masada. As we know, Masada basically was built by Herod the Great. And what's interesting is he, basically put in a lot of work into it. And he also supplied Masada with a lot of the provisionary stuff, right? So they had plenty of grain, they have everything basically. And as we know, Titus, not the Titus at the time, it was, who was the governor at the time? Licinius Bassus, in order to conquer the, zealot stronghold, Masada, he resolved to conquer one of the remaining rebel strongholds. Masada is led by Eleazar, another Eleazar, son of Jairus, and the Sicari. So Sicari was there, so they all the way through. The bandit chief Eleazar, son of Jairus, autocrat with Sicari at Masada. And so what's happening is basically, as we know, they not run out of provision, but they know there's no way out. And they're saying they choose 10 men to kill the other, and 9 are then killed by one. And he kills himself. 960 are dead, and 72 or 73 CE is happening around that time. So this was in 69, the destruction of Jerusalem. This is 3 years later. When Romans arrived, they find 2 women survivors hiding in the conduit. Sicari and all the Jews are slain in Alexandria after that. Now, what's interesting is now the Israeli forces, the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, they actually salute those brave men. And what's interesting, when Rome soldiers entered and they saw everybody committing suicide, they found it extremely brave, and they commemorated with trumpets the fact that they were extremely brave. And what was, go ahead.
Yeah, Zach, so the situation is that at this point, Josephus is traveling with the Roman army, and that's what he's recording is his experience from that perspective?
He's traveling and trying to persuade, zealots to give up, and they basically tell him no.
Okay.
No, we're not giving up, and he's not doing a good job.
And these things like somebody eating, the poor woman eating her baby,
Mary,
that's all Josephus.
That's all Josephus wrote about.
Okay.
At this point, Josephus is in the entourage of Titus, right? So
that's what it sounds like.
He's under his protection. That's how he gets his food every day, and he's employed essentially by Titus.
So he's basically a traitor to the Jewish people.
Correct.
Okay.
When they up until the 16th, 17th century, I think it was so looked at as, him being a traitor, but then the people were looking into, they read the Antique of, Jewish World, they read his, against Appian. He's afraid of writing against Rome, but at the same time, you can't deny that he had a lot of good things to say about Jews and educate non-Jews on the Jewish customs, which was important because, even though I think in 16th century or 15th century, 15th century during the Inquisition, Spanish used his writing to say that, basically, the Jews are the scorns of the world, and here's he's writing, showing that they don't listen to God, and therefore they're on. So there was a Spanish version of the Josephus, translated however they want to. So they use it for and against, in different aspects, I guess.
Sure. Well, being a traitor is always in the eyes of the beholder.
But
The one side thinks they're a traitor, the other side thinks they're a hero.
really not, it's not so simple at all just to call him a traitor. I mean, I think that's wrong. It's a misunderstanding of what went on. When the Jewish rebellion started, there was actually a centralized leadership in Jerusalem and Josephus was officially sent out as their representative. And when Zach talked about the war that he was having with John, there were people who were declaring themselves independent leaders and fighting with each other and bickering, but there was a centralized leadership in Jerusalem that was supposedly leading this. And as time went on, the zealots essentially took that over. And as we said, they were actually fighting a civil war in Jerusalem while this was happening. And Josephus is basically looking at it and saying, these people are all crazy. I mean, they were insanely suicidal. And essentially, I think what Josephus was saying is, this is not my team anymore. These are people who came in and pushed aside all the same people, and they're going to take us all over the edge, which they exactly did. So it's not, so who was Josephus a traitor to at that point? The people that he had been part of had been pushed out by this revolution of crazies.
And I think you make a good point, Paul, and of course it's more complex than just being simplistic like that. But on the other hand, he was traveling with the oppressor force, the invader force, the colonizing force, the Romans.
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of Jews consider him a traitor, for sure, but not all.
The world was ruled by the Romans. To rebel against the Romans in a place like Judea was the craziest idea that you could possibly have at this stage in Roman history, with the height of the empire. It was pure suicide. It was nothing but.
Well, that's certainly what Benedict Arnold thought, vis-a-vis the Britons.
Yeah, well, the Britons in that time were not like the Romans at this time. There was nothing like the sort of dominance that the Romans had.
No, but Benedict Arnold was wronged by the American command. I mean, he was prosecuted. He was.
Well, anyway, I don't want to go off on I don't want to take us off on another thing, but no, the issue of who betrays whom is always complex, particularly in the fog of war.
So just to finish off with this, what was the outcome of the Jewish war writing of itself? What do we derive now? Like, for example, not recently, in 1952, there was a copper scrolls, as Greg had mentioned, has been found. They said some of the essence, remember the essence were the ones that were waiting for the God reincarnation, or they shut themselves from the world and were completely religious Jews. So kind of like ultra Orthodox Jews. And some of the essence hidden this copper scrolls, that actually right now is located in Jordan. And the Israel can't get a hold of them, but apparently, it's the Aramaic version of the I believe of important essence writing, or maybe a commentary to the Old Testament, stuff like that. And this is how it looks. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, but besides this copper one, there were found the Dead Sea Scrolls that are on the parchment, and that was the essence. And what's interesting is that this sect lived in a very communal way, and there are a lot of theories is that Jesus Christ spent some time with them, because a lot of ideas of Christianity are very, very similar to the ideas by which the saints lived in a communal type of way.
I completely agree with that. And I'd add that both the Essenes and Jesus were people who believed that the end of days was coming immediately, right? They were apocalypticists, as they say. And they shared that idea that the judgment of God was going to come in their lifetime or very soon afterward. That was a thread of belief in Judea.
Says most importantly, they escaped the burning city to hide this. And for some reason, people thought that was some kind of treasure, but that was their treasure. And what was another outcome of this writing? They found a tomb of Herod based on reading, Antiquity of Judaism, and based on giving a locality by Josephus. So some things, I guess were good to follow. And this is how the tomb of Herod looks. And that's all to my presentation, guys.
Yay, very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Zach.
Sorry, this was last
Thank
minute.
you.
I apologize. I was trying to, schedule my trip on Saturday, and I have another presentation coming up on Sunday, so I was scrapped this up last minute, and Sergio helped. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, it's a lot of material.
In 2 hours, you can't do it in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Impossible.
There's one reason that Josephus is important is because he wrote a lot about a time when very few other writings have survived. So he writes a lot about the Hellenistic period, and we don't have much much history writing about the Hellenistic period. So it makes him, a very valuable source just because there's nothing else for a lot of those years.
Just one interesting statistic I remember when I was reading Tacitus, who was almost a contemporary, basically. He said that prior to the destruction of Jerusalem, the population of Jerusalem was about 600,000 people, which could give you that this was a huge city.
I can tell you that modern scholars would completely dispute that.
Maybe, but that's why I'm saying it's a Tacitus.
They say that, outside of Rome and Alexandria, there was probably nothing in the empire bigger than 100,000. The next biggest place might be Antioch.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
Just found it. Well, at least that's what they tested at the time estimated. But yeah, I could certainly see that he could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the study of demography is very difficult, but that seems to, because of the information is very bizarre, very weird. There's no written, census information for most of it. But they've said that Rome approached 1 million people at some point, which was an amazing thing in the ancient world, and maybe Alexandria may be about half that size, and no other city more than 100,000, or much more than that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this was an interesting read, but next read we're gonna have is an interesting one, right? The Xenophon Anabasis, which is gonna be around, I don't remember what the date is, but somewhere in January. But so please read that one before we come, so it would be more interesting to follow. And this Sunday we have a tour of the Archaeological Museum of Istanbul. They're purely my pictures next to them, and explanations next to them. Maybe, some of them will be familiar with Paul's presentation that he did. So, explanations from the Greek statues. There's a lot of overlap there. There's a lot of Greek stuff there.
That would be fascinating, Zach, but are you gonna have time for that since what are you leaving Monday, did you say?
I'm leaving Saturday. It's Sunday, so I'm just gonna dedicate a couple hours. Greg is gonna help me present. Greg, you're gonna help me.
What time is this on
Yeah,
Sunday? Is this the regular 4 o'clock?
No, I'll tell you. It's not regular because I moved it from Saturday because I'm gonna be traveling. So I moved it to 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock on Sunday.
Yeah. So
Okay,
it's gonna be no more than 2 hours. I'd like to keep within the time.
yeah, you have to.
You
You
wanna
don't
get
want to
out
miss
to the
your
beach?
plane. Yeah.
Got to get to the beach.
Will you be in Dominican Republic on Sunday, Zach?
Yeah, Punta Cana, yeah.
Oh.
President's Palace. That's
Oh, wow.
President's Suites, sorry.
Yeah, so you're going on Saturday.
I'm going on Saturday in the morning, yes.
Oh, wow. Well, have a great holiday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Happy New Year, everybody, and have a
Yeah.
great trip, Zach.
Yeah.
I'll see
yeah.
you again on Sunday.
Okay.
Sunday.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Zach.
Bye-bye,
we'll
Zach.
talk.
Bye-bye,
All the
everybody.
best. Take